List of presidential assassination attempts. The attempt to kill President Andrew Jackson happened on January 30th, 1835, outside the United States Capitol. It was the first recorded attempt to kill a sitting U.S. president. As Jackson was leaving a funeral for South Carolina Congressman Warren R. Davis, a man named Richard Lawrence, an unemployed house painter, approached him. Lawrence pulled out a pistol and fired at Jackson from close range, but the gun misfired. Jackson charged at Lawrence with his cane. Lawrence then pulled out a second pistol and fired, but this gun also misfired. Jackson's aides and bystanders, including Tennessee Congressman Davy Crockett, stopped Lawrence. The odds of both guns misfiring were extremely low, leading to speculation that divine intervention played a role. Lawrence was later found to be mentally unstable and was committed for the rest of his life. Jackson believed that his political enemies had planned the assassination attempt, but no evidence of a conspiracy was found. The incident only made Jackson more popular and reinforced his image as a resilient and determined leader. A solitary shot from a rifle, discharged by an unidentified sniper, narrowly missed striking Lincoln's head by mere inches, slicing through his hat. This alarming incident took place as he traveled unaccompanied in the late evening, covering a distance of 3 miles, 5 kilometers, north from the White House to the soldier's home. His customary sanctuary where he would labor and rest before returning to the White House the next morning. Private John W. Nichols of the Pennsylvania 150th Volunteers, the sentry stationed at the gated entrance to the soldier's home grounds, not only heard the rifle shot around 11 p.m., but also witnessed the president riding bareheaded towards him moments afterward. Lincoln subsequently detailed the occurrence to Ward Lamon, his longtime confidant and devoted bodyguard. William Howard Taft, the 27th President of the United States, survived an assassination attempt in October 1909, an event that is not as widely known as other presidential assassination attempts. During his visit to Mexico to meet with Mexican President Porfirio Diaz, an assassination attempt was made on both leaders as they rode together in an open carriage across the International Bridge between El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. Frederick L. Sfartis, Fritz Janke, a member of an anarchist group, planned to assassinate the presidents during the procession. However, the plot was uncovered and thwarted by U.S. Secret Service agents who arrested Janke in El Paso before he could get close to Taft or Diaz. The increased security during Taft's visit, including the presence of a large number of U.S. and Mexican soldiers, likely contributed to preventing the attempt. Taft completed his visit without incident, and the event was largely overshadowed by the successful diplomatic exchange between the two nations. This attempted assassination serves as a reminder of the constant dangers faced by public figures, even during seemingly peaceful and diplomatic occasions. The assassination attempt on Theodore Roosevelt occurred on October 14, 1912, during his campaign for a third term as president, running as the candidate for the Progressive Party, also known as the Bull Moose Party. Roosevelt was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, preparing to give a speech at the Milwaukee Auditorium. As he was about to enter his car outside the Hotel Gilpatrick, a saloon keeper named John Schrank approached him. Schrank, who was mentally unstable and had been stalking Roosevelt across several states, shot him in the chest with a .38 caliber revolver at close range. Remarkably, the bullet was slowed by a metal eyeglass case and a thick folded 50-page copy of the speech that Roosevelt had in his breast pocket. The bullet lodged in his chest muscle but did not penetrate his lung. Despite being shot, Roosevelt insisted on delivering his scheduled speech. When he took the stage, he started by revealing the bullet hole in his blood-stained shirt and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose." He then spoke for nearly 90 minutes, delivering his speech with the bullet still in his chest. After the speech, Roosevelt was taken to the hospital, where doctors determined that it was safer to leave the bullet in place rather than remove it. He carried the bullet in his chest for the rest of his life. Schrank was immediately subdued and later declared insane. He claimed that he was acting on instructions from the ghost of President William McKinley, who had been assassinated in 1901. Schrank was committed to a mental institution where he spent the rest of his life. Roosevelt's incredible resilience and determination during this incident further cemented his reputation as one of the toughest and most determined figures in American political history. Herbert Hoover, the 31st President of the United States, survived an assassination attempt in 1928 during his presidential campaign while on a goodwill tour in Argentina. A group of Argentine anarchists opposed to his visit plotted to blow up Hoover's train as it crossed a bridge on December 13, 1928. However, the authorities foiled the attempt after receiving intelligence about the plan. The leader of the group, Severino Di Giovanni, and several associates were apprehended, and the bomb was safely defused before Hoover's train arrived. Despite the assassination attempt, Hoover continued his tour without further incident and later became president. This incident underscores the risks faced by political figures, even during international goodwill missions. The assassination attempt on Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, occurred on February 15, 1933, just weeks before his inauguration as the 32nd President of the United States. The incident took place at Bayfront Park in Miami, Florida. Roosevelt was delivering an impromptu speech from the back of an open car to a large crowd. Among the spectators was Giuseppe Zangara, an Italian immigrant and unemployed bricklayer who harbored a deep hatred for government officials, blaming them for his financial troubles and chronic pain. Armed with a .32 caliber revolver, Zangara approached Roosevelt's car and fired 5 shots. Zangara, who was short in stature, had to stand on a wobbly chair to get a clear view of Roosevelt, which likely affected his aim. Although he intended to kill Roosevelt, he missed the president-elect. Instead, his bullets struck 5 other people in the crowd, including Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak, who was standing on the running board of Roosevelt's car. Cermak was critically injured and rushed to the hospital. Despite efforts to save him, he died 19 days later, on March 6, 1933. His death fueled speculation that Zangara might have intended to target Cermak, possibly due to Cermak's connections with organized crime, although this theory was never proven. Zangara was quickly subdued by bystanders and arrested. He confessed to the crime, expressing his hatred for political leaders and claiming he would have shot any politician in power. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death for Cermak's murder. Zangara was executed in the electric chair on March 20, 1933, just over a month after the assassination attempt. The incident did not deter Roosevelt, who went on to become one of the most influential U.S. presidents, leading the country through the Great Depression and World War II. The assassination attempt also prompted the Secret Service to increase security measures for U.S. presidents and other high-ranking officials. On November 3, 1950, an assassination attempt on President Harry S. Truman occurred at Blair House, the temporary residence of the president during renovations to the White House. The attack, orchestrated by Puerto Rican nationalists Oscar Collazo and Griselio Torresola, was a bold effort to draw attention to the Puerto Rican independence movement by targeting Truman. Collazo and Torresola, members of the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico, sought to end U.S. control of the island. Approaching Blair House from different directions, the assailants carried out a coordinated assault. Torresola, skilled with firearms, fatally shot White House police officer Leslie Koffolt at close range and wounded another officer, Joseph Downs. Meanwhile, Collazo attempted to enter Blair House but was met with immediate resistance from Secret Service agents and police, leading to a fierce gun battle. Despite sustaining critical wounds, Officer Koffolt managed to shoot and kill Torresola, likely preventing a direct threat to President Truman, who was upstairs at the time. Collazo survived his injuries and was later sentenced to death, which President Truman commuted to life in prison. He remained incarcerated until his release in 1979 as part of a clemency order from President Jimmy Carter. The assassination attempt on John F. Kennedy in 1960 is a lesser-known incident that occurred during his campaign for the presidency. This event took place on December 11, 1960, in Palm Beach, Florida, just weeks after Kennedy had won the election. Kennedy was spending time at his family's estate in Palm Beach when Richard Paul Pavlik, a 73-year-old former postal worker with a deep-seated hatred for Kennedy, devised a plan to kill the president-elect. Pavlik was angry about what he perceived as Kennedy's wealth and influence, believing that the Kennedy family had too much power. Pavlik's plan was simple but deadly. He filled his car with dynamite and intended to ram it into Kennedy's vehicle, causing an explosion that would kill Kennedy. On the morning of December 11th, Pavlik parked outside the Kennedy estate, waiting for Kennedy to leave for church. When he saw Kennedy emerge, accompanied by his wife Jacqueline and their children, Pavlik hesitated. Seeing Kennedy with his family made him rethink his plan, and he decided not to go through with the attack at that moment. Pavlik continued to stalk Kennedy for several days, but his suspicious behavior had already caught the attention of law enforcement. On December 15, 1960, Pavlik was arrested by the Secret Service in Palm Beach. The dynamite was found in his car, and it was clear that he had come very close to carrying out his plan. Pavlik was charged with threatening the life of the president-elect, but he was never tried for his crime. He was declared mentally ill and was committed to a mental institution. He spent several years in confinement before being released in 1966. The attempted assassination of President Richard Nixon by Arthur Bremer is a significant event, even though it did not succeed. Arthur Bremer, a troubled 21-year-old from Milwaukee, gained infamy for his actions and plans in the early 1970s. In 1972, Bremer targeted Nixon, driven by a desire for notoriety rather than political ideology. He meticulously planned to assassinate the president to gain instant fame, documenting his thoughts and plans in a diary later published as An Assassin's Diary. Bremer's initial attempt to get close to Nixon during the president's campaign events in April 1972 was unsuccessful due to tight security. Undeterred, he followed Nixon to several other locations but still couldn't get close enough to attempt the assassination. Growing increasingly frustrated, Bremer abandoned his plans to kill Nixon and instead focused on another prominent political figure, Alabama Governor George Wallace. On May 15, 1972, Bremer shot Wallace multiple times during a campaign rally in Laurel, Maryland, severely wounding him and leaving Wallace paralyzed from the waist down for life. Bremer was quickly apprehended after the shooting and was later convicted of attempted murder. Despite being sentenced to 63 years in prison, he served 35 years before being released on parole in 2007. The attempted assassination of President Gerald Ford in Sacramento, California, took place on September 5, 1975, marking one of two attempts on Ford's life within just 17 days. Lynette "Squeaky" Fromm, a member of the notorious Manson family cult led by Charles Manson, was responsible for the Sacramento incident. Fromm, a devoted follower of Manson, had become increasingly radicalized, especially in her beliefs regarding environmental issues and Manson's apocalyptic ideology. On the morning of September 5th, as President Ford walked from his hotel to the California state capitol to meet with Governor Jerry Brown, Fromm, dressed in a bright red robe, approached him and pulled out a Colt .45 caliber pistol from under her robe, aiming it directly at Ford. Thankfully, Fromm was swiftly subdued before she could discharge the weapon. Secret Service agent Larry Buendorf spotted the gun and promptly seized it, preventing Fromm from pulling the trigger. Although the gun was loaded, there was no round in the chamber, meaning it could not have fired unless manually cocked. Fromm was immediately arrested and later convicted of attempting to assassinate the President of the United States. She was sentenced to life in prison but was released on parole in 2009 after serving 34 years. Despite the assassination attempt, Ford remained composed and proceeded with his schedule undeterred. Just 17 days later, another attempt on his life occurred in San Francisco. The September 22, 1975 assassination attempt on President Gerald Ford in San Francisco marked the second such incident in a month. The would-be assassin, Sarah Jane Moore, a 45-year-old former FBI informant and political radical, attempted to take the president's life just days after another failed attempt in Sacramento, California, by Lynette "Squeaky" Fromm, a follower of Charles Manson. As Ford left the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco, Moore fired a .38 caliber revolver at him, missing her target but injuring a bystander in the process. Quick intervention by former Marine Oliver Sipple likely saved Ford's life, as Moore had a clear line of sight and was within striking distance. Moore, who wanted to draw attention to the social issues she felt were being ignored, was charged with attempted assassination, pleaded guilty, and was sentenced to life in prison. Despite serving 32 years, she was released on parole in 2007 due to good behavior. These attempts prompted significant changes in presidential security procedures, highlighting the threats faced by U.S. presidents. Despite the danger, Ford continued his presidency without letting the incidents deter his public appearances or commitment to his duties. The assassination attempt on President Jimmy Carter occurred on May 5, 1979, during a trip to Los Angeles, California. Involved a man named Raymond Lee Harvey, a 35-year-old drifter from Ohio with a history of mental illness. On the day of the incident, President Carter was scheduled to give a speech at the Civic Center Mall in Los Angeles. As the event was being prepared, Secret Service agents noticed Harvey loitering near the stage. He was behaving suspiciously, carrying a starter pistol, an unloaded firearm typically used to signal the start of races. Harvey was detained and questioned by the Secret Service. During the interrogation, he made a startling claim. He said he was part of a broader conspiracy to assassinate President Carter. According to Harvey, he was working with a group of conspirators, including a man named Osvaldo Espinoza Ortiz. Harvey claimed that the group planned to create a diversion with the starter pistol, while another gunman, armed with a real weapon, would carry out the assassination. Harvey's claims were taken seriously at first, leading to an intensive investigation. Law enforcement officials arrested Ortiz and searched the area for any signs of other conspirators or weapons. However, no evidence was found to substantiate Harvey's story. It soon became apparent that Harvey was likely fabricating or exaggerating the plot, possibly due to his mental instability. Harvey was charged with misdemeanor offenses related to carrying the starter pistol, but the charges were eventually dropped. The case did not result in any significant criminal convictions, and it quickly faded from public attention. The assassination attempt on President Ronald Reagan occurred on March 30, 1981, just 69 days into his presidency. This incident took place outside the Washington Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C., and stands as one of the most significant assassination attempts in American history. On that day, Reagan had just finished delivering a speech to the AFL-CIO at the hotel and was leaving the venue, walking toward his limousine. As he exited the hotel, a crowd of reporters, photographers, and onlookers had gathered outside. The assailant, John Hinckley Jr., a 25-year-old man with a history of mental illness and an obsession with actress Jodie Foster, took advantage of the crowd. Hinckley believed that by assassinating the president, he could gain Foster's attention and affection. As Reagan approached his car, Hinckley pulled out a .22 caliber revolver and fired 6 shots in rapid succession, resulting in critical injuries. 1. The first bullet struck James Brady, the White House press secretary, leaving him critically injured and permanently disabled. 2. Thomas Delahanty, a D.C. police officer, was hit in the neck by the second bullet as he turned to protect Reagan. 3. The third shot missed everyone and ricocheted off the limousine. 4. Tim McCarthy, a Secret Service agent, was hit in the abdomen as he shielded the president. 5. The sixth and final bullet ricocheted off the limousine's armored side and struck Reagan under his left arm, lodging in his lung just an inch from his heart. Reagan, initially unaware that he had been shot, was quickly shoved into the limousine by Secret Service agents. As the car sped away, he began to feel intense pain and noticed he was coughing up blood. The decision was made to take him to George Washington University Hospital instead of returning to the White House. At the hospital, despite his serious injury, Reagan walked into the emergency room under his own power and maintained his sense of humor, famously telling the doctors, "I hope you're all Republicans." The surgeons successfully removed the bullet, and Reagan's recovery began. Reagan's resilience and quick return to duty just a few weeks later earned him widespread admiration. The incident also led to significant changes in the security protocols for protecting the president and other high-ranking officials. John Hinckley Jr. was arrested at the scene and later found not guilty by reason of insanity. He was committed to a psychiatric hospital and remained under care until his gradual release, beginning in 2016 under strict conditions. The assassination attempt on President George H.W. Bush occurred on April 13, 1993, in Kuwait City, Kuwait. The attack was orchestrated by a group linked to the Iraqi government, specifically involving members of the Shia extremist group known as the Islamic Jihad Organization. President Bush was visiting Kuwait City as part of a trip to mark the 10th anniversary of the Gulf War, which had resulted in the liberation of Kuwait from Iraqi occupation. As he was leaving a hotel and heading towards a banquet at a nearby palace, the assassination plot was carried out. The attackers had planted a bomb in a truck and planned to detonate it as Bush's motorcade passed by. The bomb was intended to be a massive explosion designed to kill Bush and those accompanying him. However, the plot was thwarted due to an unexpected intervention. The truck carrying the bomb was spotted and intercepted by Kuwaiti security forces who had been alerted to the plot by a tip-off. Upon discovering the bomb, the authorities quickly dismantled it and arrested several suspects. This preemptive action prevented any harm from coming to President Bush and ensured the safety of his delegation. The investigation revealed that the plot was part of a larger scheme orchestrated by Iraqi operatives, likely seeking retribution for the Gulf War, and Bush's role in leading the coalition forces that expelled Iraqi troops from Kuwait. The Kuwaiti authorities cooperated closely with U.S. intelligence and law enforcement agencies to uncover and thwart the attack. The incident highlighted the ongoing threats to the safety of U.S. presidents and other high-profile figures and underscored the importance of international cooperation in addressing and preventing terrorism. George H.W. Bush completed his trip to Kuwait safely, and the incident did not impact his scheduled activities. On October 29, 1994, a 26-year-old man named Francisco Martin Duran attempted to assassinate President Bill Clinton in the White House. Motivated by political grievances and personal issues, Duran drove from Colorado to Washington, D.C., armed with a semi-automatic rifle. He fired at least 29 rounds at the White House from outside the security perimeter. Thankfully, the Secret Service and White House security staff apprehended Duran before anyone was harmed. Duran was charged with multiple offenses, including attempted assassination of the President of the United States. His trial revealed his radical and anti-government views, leading to a life sentence without the possibility of parole. On May 10, 2005, an assassination attempt occurred on President George W. Bush during his visit to Tbilisi, Georgia. President Bush was in Georgia to discuss U.S.-Georgia relations with President Mikhail Saakashvili. As he addressed a large crowd in Freedom Square, a 27-year-old man named Vladimir Aratunian, a member of a radical group, threw a grenade toward the stage in an attempt to harm both presidents. The grenade failed to explode as planned, causing no injuries. Aratunian was promptly apprehended by Georgian security forces. It was later revealed that he had targeted the presidents to make a political statement. Aratunian was arrested in July 2005 after killing an Interior Ministry agent during his apprehension. In January 2006, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Despite the incident, President Bush was unharmed and continued with his visit to Georgia without interruption. The attempted assassination involving gunfire at the White House took place on November 11, 2011. During this incident, a man named Oscar Ramiro Ortega Hernandez, a 21-year-old from Idaho, who was later found to have a history of mental illness and anti-government sentiments, carried out an attack. Ortega Hernandez had traveled from Idaho to Washington, D.C., with the intention of attacking President Barack Obama. Using an assault rifle, he fired several shots at the White House from a distance while in his parked car. The Secret Service detected the gunfire, prompting an immediate lockdown of the White House as security personnel responded to the threat. Fortunately, no one in the White House was injured during the attack, as President Obama was not present at the time. His shots, however, did cause damage to the exterior of the White House, including breaking a window. Ortega Hernandez fled the scene, but was later apprehended by law enforcement officers in a nearby area. Ortega Hernandez was charged with multiple offenses, including attempted assassination of the President of the United States. In 2012, he was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in prison. On June 18, 2016, there was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump during a campaign rally in Dayton, Ohio. The attempt was made by a 19-year-old man named Michael Stephen Sanford, who had traveled from the United Kingdom to the United States with the intention of assassinating Trump. During the rally at the Wright State University's Nutter Center, Sanford tried to take a police officer's gun while Trump was speaking, planning to use it to kill the candidate. However, he was unable to grab the weapon and was swiftly apprehended by Secret Service agents and local law enforcement. An investigation later revealed that Sanford had been planning the attack for several months and had previously tried to obtain a firearm in Las Vegas, Nevada. Sanford faced several charges, including attempting to commit an act of violence on restricted grounds. In 2016, he pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 12.5 years in prison. On July 13, 2024, Donald Trump, the former president of the United States and the Republican Party's presumptive nominee in the 2024 presidential election, was shot and wounded in his right ear while addressing a campaign rally near Butler, Pennsylvania. The assailant, 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, fired 8 rounds with an AR-15-style rifle from the roof of a building approximately 400 feet, 120 meters, from the stage. During the attack, an audience member named Corey Comparatori was killed, and 2 others were critically injured. The U.S. Secret Service's counter-sniper team promptly shot and killed Crooks. Video footage of the incident captured Trump holding his right ear before taking cover on the floor of the podium, shielded by Secret Service personnel. Following assistance to his feet, Trump emerged with blood on his ear and face. He then either mouthed or shouted the words, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" Iconic and historically significant images of a bloodied Trump pumping his fist in the air against the backdrop of an American flag were captured by photojournalist Evan Vucci and quickly went viral on social media. Trump was promptly escorted off stage and taken to a nearby hospital before being released in stable condition shortly thereafter.